Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer. I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. Life can play strange tricks on us, throwing us curveballs when we least expect them. While we all want our lives to be smooth and predictable, this just isn't the way things are. This endless pandemic is a great example of that. Whatever we may have thought was coming down the pipeline 1 year or so ago, most likely turned out to be completely wrong because of this thing. But it doesn't take a pandemic to throw things off course. It can be the smallest little bump in the road that does the trick. Among life's great challenges are those little moral conflicts that poke their heads out of the sand when we thought we were prepared for anything. We may have been sure that we could handle whatever comes our way, but then we find ourselves with something that just sends everything awry. All of our principles and beliefs go right out the window with one little chance at something we always dreamed of, or just something that catches us off guard. Sometimes we find that we have to succumb to forces greater than our own beliefs because we just do. Are these moments of failure, or are they simply facing reality in the eye? This week's Parsha is called Toldot. That word means generations, but it can also mean history. The generations or history referred to is that of Isaac, Abraham's son, who was born 2 Parshas ago and got married to Rebekah in last week's Parsha. This week's Parsha deals primarily with his 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. In fact, Isaac himself and Rebekah are more like background players in the central drama between these 2 classic biblical protagonists. They were born as twins after Rebekah received some prophetic insight as to why her long-awaited pregnancy was so difficult. She was told that they would have great destinies, but would be at odds in some way with one another. When they were born, the older Esau came out all hairy and red, while the younger Jacob emerged clutching his brother's heel. This was a sign of things to come. Esau became a hunter and an outdoorsman, while Jacob was quiet and introspective, preferring the inside. Isaac, for some reason, took to Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob, another sign of things to come. A strange incident happened in their youth that may have seemed insignificant at the time, but would eventually become almost an act of fate. One day, when Esau came in after a tiring day outdoors, he was famished and saw Jacob cooking something. He asked for some, but Jacob insisted that Esau give him his firstborn right in exchange for the food. Esau reasoned that he was going to die anyway, so he agreed. The deal was sealed with an oath, and each came out thinking that he had gotten the better hand. So it was that Jacob, in a sense, gained the biblically significant status of firstborn. Many years later, when Isaac was already old and blind, he called to his slightly older son Esau and told him to hunt for some game and prepare a meal for him so that he could bless him before his death. It happened that Rebekah overheard this and told Jacob that he had to move fast to get this blessing himself rather than waste it on Esau, who wouldn't appreciate it for what it was. It should be noted at this point that personal blessings, especially those from a revered patriarch, were nothing to be taken lightly in the Bible. They were everything. And Rebekah knew this. She made her move. Jacob somewhat reluctantly went along with her scheme of him dressing up as Esau by wearing skins that would fool his blind father, while Rebekah would handle preparing the food before Esau managed to return. As unlikely as all this sounds, this was the plan that got the blessing. Jacob questioned it right from the start, saying that his father would somehow see through it and he would be cursed rather than blessed. Rebekah responded with the cryptic reply that the curse would be upon her. So it was that this crucial blessing entered into the fates of Jacob and Esau. The plan went splendidly, and Jacob entered Isaac's presence with the food. Isaac, for some reason, asked who he was, and Jacob answered that he was Esau, the firstborn. Isaac seemed a little suspicious of something and asked Jacob to approach him so that he could feel him. Jacob approached, Isaac felt him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, and the hands are the hands of Esau." A fateful statement if there ever was one. Despite these clearly expressed suspicions, Isaac then blessed him with all the words of a classic biblical blessing. God will give you the dew of the heavens and the fat of the earth, and much grain and wine. Nations will serve you. Peoples will bow down to you. You shall triumph over your brother, and the children of your mother will bow to you. Those who curse you will be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed. So it was that Jacob received the blessing from his father. Jacob then left, and immediately afterwards Esau came in, intent on presenting his food and receiving his blessing. Isaac then realized what had happened and began trembling, but he understood that what was done, and it could not be undone. When Esau heard his father say that the blessing had already been given, he understood that Jacob had tricked him. He cried out in bitterness and asked for his own blessing. He even said that Jacob's name in some way foretold this whole business, in that he had tricked him twice in taking both his birthright and his blessing. The name Jacob in Hebrew is Yaakov, which is related to the word heel and to the word trick, as in outmaneuvering someone. Upon hearing his son weeping for the loss of his blessing, Isaac granted him a consolation blessing of sorts, in which Esau's fate would be tied to that of Jacob, sometimes subservient and sometimes independent. It is difficult to come away from the scene without feeling sorry for Esau. This brings us to the main point of this class. What are we supposed to get from this story? Jacob is supposed to be the good guy and Esau the bad guy. Yet it is Jacob who is playing tricks and even lying to his father to get that blessing. There is no getting around the fact that he told his father that he was none other than Esau, the firstborn. There is no getting around the fact that Isaac was fooled and eventually realized this. There is also no getting around the fact that this blessing that Jacob received was meant for his brother, but he managed to get it. What are we to do with all this? Let's grant that Esau willingly gave up his firstborn privileges. So Jacob really should have received this blessing. Isaac, however, apparently never knew about their deal so many years earlier. But Jacob did, and he had this as a justification for his fateful actions. He really didn't want to go through with the plan, since he obviously might be found out. It was Rebekah who filled in the details and made it happen. But Jacob had to be the one who actually carried it out. He knew that he should get this blessing and that it would be wasted on Esau, who had no appreciation for these sorts of things, as seen from his selling of his birthright. So what choice did Jacob really have? Well, he could have told his father about the deal, but who knows how that would have turned out. Should he have been straight with Isaac and told him right on the spot that he was actually Jacob, but that he deserved the blessing? It is hard to imagine that going well. What he did, perhaps, was the only reasonable shot at actually succeeding in what he knew must happen. So this was the dilemma: to fool his father by outsmarting Esau, or to forego the blessing entirely. It should be noted that Isaac was not as blind to what was going on as it may have seemed. He did ask to feel Jacob, obviously because of his suspicions. His remark, "The voice is the voice of Jacob and the hands are the hands of Esau," seems to zero in on what was actually happening right in front of him. He knew something was up. It really seems that this was a case of everybody knowing in some way what really should happen, but nobody wanting to make the move of actually making it happen. Rebekah was the only one who was willing to proactively push the issue. She dragged Jacob in, and he had to go along, knowing that this was the way things were supposed to go. But he had to lie, to deceive his father, even as his father realized he was being deceived. Sometimes this is the only way things happen in the way that they are destined. They have to be pushed along to fruition by hook or by crook. Jacob understood that he was facing one of those moral dilemmas that hit us when we aren't really looking. When we realize what is going on, it is too late. We are too committed to the end goal to let moral scruples get in the way. This, for better or worse, is the way things sometimes have to be. There is no other way to accomplish what must be done other than bending the rules and living with the consequences. There is a reward for such behavior. In Jacob's case, it was to receive the coveted blessing. But there was also an unavoidable consequence. He would have to live with what he had done. Whether that curse truly went to Rebekah or not is unclear in the story. What is clear is that Jacob received the blessing of the firstborn, which he deserved, and Esau didn't, which he didn't. The aftermath of all this was that Esau wanted to kill Jacob for outsmarting him, and Jacob had to leave his home. He spent the next 20 years back in Mesopotamia, marrying wives and producing children. When he finally came back, he had gained the new name Israel, and his destiny was set. It came in some way from this blessing, which was given under less than pristine circumstances. But sometimes that is the way things have to be. Life is strange and unexpected. Those curveballs thrown our way have to be handled one way or the other. Sometimes we take the bull by the horns and control our own fate in spite of everything. Other times we let things happen and hope for the best. Either way, there are consequences. If attaining what we truly believe is ours by right requires some monkey business, some of us will be willing to pay that price. Jacob was one of these. He did what he had to do, and he lived with the results. Was he right? Each one of us has to answer that question in our own lives as we make these Jacob-like choices and bear the consequences. Our stories are not written in the Bible, but they are written somewhere. We are the ones who must reread these stories. Let's hope that we can live with whatever we have written. Shabbat Shalom.